right? So chapter 7 is all about respiration, right? And so respiration is how your cells gets energy from the food that you're eating, basically, right? How your cells are harvesting energy. And so the first kind of chunk of this chapter is going to be not actually talking about the steps in respiration, but kind of outlining some of the vocab and mechanics that we'll need, that will be going on in respiration, so that when we actually walk through it, hopefully it's a slightly less painful process, ideally. All right, so in this first little chunk, we're going to talk about oxidative dehydrogenation reactions, which is a really long word. Don't let it bother you. It's just a specific kind of redox reaction. All right, we've got redox reactions. This is just it's just a kind of redox reaction. We're going to talk for a little while about electrons, right? Because this movement of electrons onto and off of molecules is how we're going to be kind of harvesting energy from them. And then ATP. ATP is always going to kind of roll back into here because it's kind of the end game of respiration. And so making and using ATP is just going to be this recurring theme through the whole, basically all of chapter 7 and 8, if I'm honest. All right, so start super broad, right? So organisms need energy to survive, right? All organisms, characteristic of life, use energy, right? And among the eukaryotes, right, we've got kind of two broad categories. Things are either autotrophic or heterotrophic, right? In eukaryotes, autotrophs are going to be your plants, algae, etc., right? These are things that photosynthesize, that are using radiant photon energy, right? And they can take that light radiant energy and convert it into chemical potential energy. They can actually convert it into stored energy in molecules like glucose. And so kind of that, if you're into kind of Greek and Latin roots and things, autotroph basically means self-feeder, right? Plants usually don't have to eat other things. It's exceptions, but generally speaking, plants aren't eating other things. They're converting light energy, combining it with inorganic materials to make kind of organic stored chemical potential energy molecules. Versus things like us, which are heterotrophs, right? And we live on the organic compounds that autotrophs produce, right? They are storing light energy in organic compounds. We then consume those organic compounds and harvest the energy from it. The roots there, heterotroph basically means fed by others, right? We can't really make our own energy. We've got to use energy that was created by, not created, but stored by other organisms. This is 95% of the organisms on Earth are heterotrophic and subsequently very much reliant on all of the autotrophs. And a thing to note, right, these processes, right, this breaking down of organic compounds that the autotrophs are making happens in heterotrophs, but autotrophs actually have to do the same thing. So we're going to talk about photosynthesis. Plants do photosynthesis. We do respiration when we eat plants or other things. But plants also have to do respiration, right? They make glucose. It's no good to them if they don't also then break it down and use the energy they're getting from the sun. So we'll kind of see this happening. But things generally are either autotrophic / photosynthetic or heterotrophic. They're eating other organisms. Kind of got two options. All right. And so everybody is doing some form of cellular respiration, right? The energy is getting stored, and whether you're storing it or eating something else that stored it, it's no good if you can't harvest it. So cellular respiration is harvesting energy from these organic compounds, right? Specifically oxidizing these organic compounds or organic chemicals to pull the energy out of them. Right? Energy is stored in chemical bonds. We're going to oxidize these molecules to release the energy from those chemical bonds. All right. Now, this oxidation of organic chemicals happens in steps, right? It's not just like you consume, you got this little molecule of glucose and your cell just blows it up and pulls all the energy out of it, right? It's a stepwise process, kind of one bond at a time gets broken down, right? You know, from the time you consume something, right? From the time you start eating something, large molecules are broken into small ones, right? By enzymes. Usually you got enzymes that are helping with this in your stomach and elsewhere, right? Those fragments are dismantled and broken into smaller things until eventually, right, your body has broken down whatever you've eaten down to like individual molecules, right? Of glucose, of lipids, of proteins, right? Of whatever, right? And at every stage, especially once we get down to this kind of chemical, every time we're breaking a bond, energy is harvested. And all of these reactions, all of this bond breaking is done by oxidation. They're all oxidation reactions, right? When oxidation happens in one spot, reduction happens somewhere else. So metabolism is basically kind of universally concerned with redox reactions, right? So when we go through respiration, it's just going to be a long series of redox reactions as we break molecules apart. Specifically, dehydrogenations, which is a weird word, but it's fine. It's just a special kind of redox reaction in which, right, oxidations we're pulling, right, if we oxidize something, we're taking electrons off there. If it's a dehydrogenation oxidation, we're pulling electrons off and we're also taking some protons, right? So oxidation is happening, but it's oxidation where I also kind of grab some protons while I'm at it, right? Protons are hydrogen atoms, which is why it's called a dehydrogenation, right? So I'm oxidizing it, I'm taking electrons, I'm also dehydrogenating, right, the molecule. So we call it a dehydrogenation reaction. Taking electrons, but also protons. Okay. So we're oxidizing, for our purposes, right, cellular respiration, we're talking about oxidizing glucose specifically, a little 6-carbon sugar, right? And so we'll have, all that this is going to be is a series of enzyme-facilitated redox reactions to convert the energy in this glucose molecule into ATP that our cell can then use to do cell stuff. Now, we mentioned cofactors when we were talking about enzymes, right? Because sometimes enzymes need little helper molecules. Nicotinamide adenosine dinucleotide, which I will never make you write, I don't think. We're just going to call it NAD+, right, is a cofactor. And its purpose is to be an electron acceptor, right? We're oxidizing things, so we're taking electrons off, and we're not just like chucking them into the wind, right? So an enzyme is going to oxidize something, and it's going to have this little cofactor, NAD+, right? It's positively charged, so it's going to be good at this. It's going to come in and grab those electrons and then take them to kind of their next step, right? So we'll see NAD+, got a little friend FAD+, that will do kind of the same thing that we'll see later. But so we have these kind of cofactors that are helping with these redox reactions. Right. Just this mechanism, it's not, don't get super bound up in this big, right? We just have an enzyme, I've got an organic molecule I want to break down, plugs in, I've got my NAD cofactor, right? We're going to oxidize this molecule, we're going to break some bonds, pull off a proton and 2 electrons. NADH is going to pick all this mess up and then take it to whatever the next step is in the process, right?
So NAD plus acts as if a like ATP and a protein at the same time.
As a, no, it's it is just picking up, so the electrons are being released to release and then the electrons need to kind of move to a next molecule. So we'll get into this on Monday, but electrons are kind of being pulled off and put back on things to release energy over and over again. And so you've got an enzyme that pulls the electrons off, and then NAD is just an electron acceptor that's going to pick them up and take them to the next step and put them on the next thing. Right? You kind of pick them up and take them off. All right. And so we'll pick up with that on Monday, right? Kind of talk a bit more about how electrons behave.